So earlier this week, and it's been such a busy week that I could refer to any number of things, you probably won't guess this one. Earlier this week, the Jerusalem campus of my alma mater, the Hebrew Union College, held an academic conference devoted to Purim. One scholar who presented there contends that Haman is actually a stand-in for Jesus. I don't know if I believe that, but in an article about this, he and another scholar drew a useful connection between Purim and Carnival. Carnival is the period before the stringency of Lent sets in. In New Orleans, it's Mardi Gras, same thing. Just as Purim is the period before the stringency of Passover sets in. They're times of letting go for each religion. And both holidays are marked by the wearing of costumes, a tradition the Jews actually took from Christians in the 15th century Rhineland. I just missed Carnival in the Rhineland this year. We stayed in Cologne, which is in the heart of the Rhineland. What I actually missed were the so-called crazy days, the 6 days before Lent that began a week ago yesterday. It's such a wild scene that the great cathedral there is closed to all but worshippers, so that church officials don't have to deal with the rowdies. That is the letting go. As for the costumes, we saw several groups dressed in 18th century military garb practicing their formations. Not too far from where we were, the town of Aalst in Belgium held its carnival. Aalst is famous for these festivities. This one included a float called Shabbat Year. One reporter said that it contained 2 large pink puppets of stereotypical Jews, complete with side locks and traditional headgear associated with Hasidic Judaism. One puppet was equipped with a white rat sitting on its shoulder, a cigar, and a grinning smile. Both had large hooked noses with golden coins and bags of money scattered at their feet. Some religious Jewish symbolism was present as well. For good measure, the parade also featured some white people in blackface makeup. Another float had marchers handing out chocolate bars while wearing Ku Klux Klan hoods. The mayor of Aalst has refused to condemn the floats, and the designers proudly claim that he's got our back. This typifies a right-wing anti-Semitism that has surfaced more and more in recent years. Meanwhile, here in the United States, we've been living through the saga of the remarks by Representative Ilhan Omar. Congresswoman Omar is the new representative of the 5th District of Minnesota. She is a Muslim Somali refugee. Well before she was elected, back in 2012, Ms. Omar tweeted, "Israel has hypnotized the world. May Allah awaken the people and help them see the evil doings of Israel." As one commentator noted, the tweet implied that Israel and its supporters were secretly tricking the world into supporting it, a long-time anti-Semitic trope. After taking office in January, Congresswoman Omar apologized for this old tweet. Then, a month later, last month, riffing on a Puff Daddy song, she claimed that congressional support for Israel was all about the Benjamins, a reference to $100 bills, and probably also to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. When asked about this, she indicated she was referring to the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, or AIPAC, a pro-Israel American lobbying group. This comment suggests that the Jews are wealthy and use their money to corrupt honest government. When challenged, she said that she unequivocally apologized. And there matters stood until a week ago. Then Congresswoman Omar appeared on a panel with fellow first-termer and fellow Muslim Rashida Tlaib. Omar said this: "It's almost as if every single time we say something, regardless of what it is we say, that is supposed to be about foreign policy or engagement or advocacy, about ending oppression or the freeing of every human life and wanting dignity, we get to be labeled something, and that ends the discussion. Because we end up defending that, and nobody wants to have the broader debate of what is happening in Palestine. So for me, I want to talk about the political influence in this country that says it is okay for people to push for allegiance to a foreign country. And I want to ask, why is it okay for me to talk about the influence of the NRA, of fossil fuel industries, or big pharma, and not talk about a powerful lobby? Well, now, had the Congresswoman simply stopped at saying that she wanted to have a fuller debate on Palestine, I doubt that there would have been a big issue. However, she went on to condemn people who push for allegiance to a foreign country. That is a problem, because it suggests that Jews are cosmopolitan, that their true loyalty isn't to the country where they live, but to the Jewish people, or, now, to Israel. That trope comes straight out of the anti-Semitic playbook, and it was used to horrifying effect in Nazi Germany, where it was said that Jews were not true Germans. While many Jewish leaders and some others condemned this dual loyalty claim, Omar held her ground. Some of her defenders denied that she was speaking of Jews, but in context it's hard to hear this as referring to anybody else. Others engaged in deflection, also called whataboutism. You're attacking Omar, but look at all the things that blank has done. Why aren't you going after that? Isn't that the real problem? As one essay I read pointed out, a good guide that your challenger is going to avoid talking about the issue at hand is when they speak of the real problem, as if there could be only one. And it is, of course, not ever the one you're talking about. In this case, the deflection involved comments by Republicans. And indeed, why aren't we talking about those? And indeed, they're easy to find. Just this past week, Congressman Jim Jordan tweeted an attack on Democratic Congressman Jerry Nadler for jumping, quote, to Tom Steyer's conclusion. Only the S in Steyer was replaced by a dollar sign. Tom Steyer is a major Democratic donor. He has a Jewish father. As one writer noted, in essence, Jordan implied that a Jewish rep is doing the bidding of Jewish money. Last summer, the man who became House Minority Leader, Kevin McCarthy, posted a tweet accusing Steyer and two other Democratic billionaires of Jewish descent, George Soros and Michael Bloomberg, of trying to buy the midterm election. And again this past week, President Trump called Jewish Congressman Adam Schiff shifty, a comment playing on his last name, but also on the history of Jews being described as crafty and sneaky manipulators. Another factor that affected the discussion of Omar's remarks was the attack on her by some West Virginia Republicans. A poster sat at a table in the State House. It featured Omar wearing her hijab underneath a picture of the Twin Towers burning. Next to the World Trade Center photo was the caption, "Never forget, you said." And next to Omar's image was the caption, "I am the proof that you have forgotten." The suggestion that Omar, as a Muslim, was linked to the 9/11 attacks is nothing short of contemptible. With all this baggage, leading progressives pushed to soften a resolution about Omar's remarks. The resolution as adopted didn't mention her by name. And as the New York Times put it, it started out as a resolution condemning anti-Semitism. Then anti-Muslim bias was added in. After that came white supremacy, and by the end it cited African Americans, Native Americans, and other people of color, Jews, Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, immigrants, and others victimized by bigotry, quote unquote. Rabbi Jeffrey Salkin likens this to the pushback against Black Lives Matter. He writes, "Conservative Americans were skittish about realizing that you could draw a straight line from Ferguson, Missouri to lynchings in the Deep South. And so what did they do? They deflected the conversation. They shifted it away from Black Lives Matter to All Lives Matter. President Trump in particular stated that Black Lives Matter is divisive and inherently racist. blacks and others were rightly furious when conservatives hijacked the conversation and took the focus off the unique suffering of African Americans. And now, friends, the same thing happened to Jews in this congressional resolution. Let me quote Rabbi Salkin again. The statement is the functional equivalent of the All Lives Matter people trying to drown out Black Lives Matter. It basically says this: Jews don't even deserve their own particular narrative. Well, before I leave Congresswoman Omar, let me be clear about one thing. I don't care if she criticizes Israel. Heck, I criticize Israel all the time, and so do a lot of Israelis. I don't care if she advocates for boycotts, or if she advocates for a one-state solution in which Jews are a permanent minority. I happen to disagree strongly with those two positions, but you can argue for them. My problem with her comments isn't Israel, it's anti-Semitism. Attacking Israel, or in this case, attacking American Jewish supporters of Israel by using anti-Semitic images, that is never acceptable. Never. So where do we go from here? First, we go to Purim. Haman was the descendant of Amalek, the ancient enemy of the Israelites from the Torah. While Jews are commanded to assist God in wiping out the name of Amalek from under the heavens, we are likewise given the seemingly contradictory command to remember what Amalek did to you. We live our lives fully regardless of anti-Semitism. That's wiping out the name of Amalek. And yet we have to understand that anti-Semitism may never disappear before the coming of the Messianic age. For a time after the Holocaust, we could believe that anti-Semitism was passing away. We can't believe that now. We have to remember what Amalek did. In order to deal with anti-Semitism, we need to educate ourselves about how it works on the right and how it works on the left. I've recently finished a new book by the renowned Holocaust scholar Deborah Lipstadt. It's called Anti-Semitism, Here and Now. I highly recommend it to you. We can realize that fighting anti-Semitism also requires us to fight injustice everywhere. It's not either or, it's both and. Professor Lipstadt is an example of this. Recently, at the instigation of Prime Minister Netanyahu as part of his re-election bid, a virulently racist party that follows the teachings of the late Meir Kahane has been brought into a joint list with other right-wing parties. The national executive of the Orthodox Young Israel movement supported this decision by the Prime Minister of Israel. Professor Lipstadt resigned in protest from her Jewish home, a Young Israel synagogue in Atlanta. Finally, we need to realize that we have to look for the good as well as be aware of the bad. As Professor Lipstadt writes, to make anti-Semitism the organizing principle of your lives means ceding to the oppressor control over one's destiny. We in Franklin know that we had allies in the fight against anti-Semitism. We saw the reaction to the Pittsburgh bombings. And today's New York Times carried a hopeful article along these same lines. Here is part of what it said. Ms. Omar's district, which spans Minneapolis and some of its inner-ring suburbs, is a place attuned to religious tension. Longtime members of the Somali community still speak about the profiling they experienced in the years after the September 11, 2001 attacks, and about the fear they felt after a mosque was bombed by white supremacists in nearby Bloomington in 2017. In those difficult times, they said, Jewish leaders in Minnesota made a point of stating their support. When religion is under attack, they stand by us because they've been there, said Zahra Ali, a Somali-American resident of Minneapolis, who once saw Ms. Omar's election as a beacon of hope, but who did not plan to vote for her now. For her to go out there and target on a daily basis Jews is very sad, Ms. Ali said. We need to keep listening. We need to keep reaching out. We need to keep cultivating friendships. In this way, we'll eventually win the true victory of Purim, a world that can move beyond hatred to acceptance and love. Until we reach that point, our costumes will and must remain garments of hope. Ken Yehi Ratzon, be this God's will.